Thank you, Rich and Gabao. It's an honor for me to present here. And I'm amazed, too, that this picture, I know where this is now. It's just right out here. And it just by happenstance, I picked that one. So I was the lead systems engineer. I'm in the systems engineering group that implemented the parametric PAT-LAC feature as a clinical thing. So I'll move on to the next slide. And speaking of which, of Rich here, so in 2018, he gave the plenary talk at the SNMMI, and he challenged people, the field, is SUV the best we can do? And in particular, he had messages for the various groups, but the messages for the scanner manufacturers where, we need to get this into the product, into the scanner software, and we need these tools to facilitate more clinical research. And I'm proud to say that industry works fast, and we released that feature at that very same conference. So who says industry's slow? And so when we were discussing, designing it, coming up with a concept, what's it need to be, we're talking with our key opinion leaders, the experts in the field. And I'll never forget Dr. John Sunderland, if you guys know him, at the University of Iowa. He said, if you do something like this, it has to be wickedly automated. And so that was our theme, wicked automation. So the whole goal was to just let the scanner go, the tech could walk away in theory, and you'd get parametric images. So in this case, you still do a topogram, a CT, you inject on the bed, start over the heart for 6 minutes, just a single bed scan, get the bolus information, and then you start the whole body dynamic passes. And this little thing here, it looks like the PET scanner's moving, but of course it's the patient that moves on the bed back and forth. And just to kind of give you an idea of the workflow, if it's the fully automated one, the patient is injected on the bed. That's that time zero that previous speaker was talking about. Let's see if I guess I can't get this to work very well. There it comes. So inject on the bed, first 6 minutes, and then we start our whole body dynamic passes. And it's important to note that they can still do their whole body FDG standard of care, the static image. Usually it happens 60 minutes to 70 minutes or so. And you just sum those passes and you still get your static SUV image. And so in order to get this on the scanner and wickedly automate it, there's two technologies that we had to develop and get into the product. One is called our alpha tools, and this was the advantage of being at Siemens, where we have kind of bigger brothers in the sense that our MRI and CT colleagues. They had developed tools that could find anatomical landmarks. So we would send our CT image off to this tool set. It would find the left ventricle. It would find the aorta. We could build VOIs on that, place those VOIs on our dynamic PET images, and get that input function automatically. So that was a key piece. And the other one was the direct recon, which kind of had its roots in the academic world. And then Vladimir Panin, our PET physicist, kind of helped us develop that and get that into the product. And so we are not doing indirect image-based PAT-LAC. We are doing the PAT-LAC during the reconstruction. So this is just an example of those VOIs, the pink sphere in the left ventricle. That's what we use to get the input function if you want left ventricle. And then there's a red cylinder on the lower right image. And that's for the thoracic aorta. And that one we found was more robust to patient motion. So we chose that by default. And then, so like I said, you put these on the dynamic PET images. The pink and the red curves are found automatically. We just use our TrueD software on the analysis software just to take a look at these kind of as a retrospective QC to be sure they look right and also that the VOI placement was correct. So then the other piece, of course, was the direct PAT-LAC reconstruction. And if you look at everything that's in the orange boxes that are not in the big green box, that's just a standard OSEM reconstruction. So that's what everybody knows and loves. We modified it that we could send multiple sinograms, so these are 3 to 6 passes, 5 minutes passes typically. The other thing, the input is the input function, so they order the left ventricle. The PATLAC is actually done as a nested loop in here, so there's an extra loop that does the fit for the slope and the intercept. And at the end, we have 2 images here, 2 parametric, the metabolic rate of FDG, so you have to multiply the slope by the blood glucose, and then the distribution volume image. And the beauty of this feature is that we didn't take anything away from the physician. We simply added. So the image on the left is their standard SUV image. The middle image is the metabolic rate of FDG, which is FDG going into that first step of metabolism. And so you can see there's uptake in the spinal column. The image on the right is the free FDG. So you see kind of the blood areas. The vessels are clearly apparent, and the liver obviously has a lot of blood background. And in your mind, if you can sum those 2 images on the right, you pretty much get the image on the left. So it's like we've broken the SUV image into its components of the trapped and the free FDG. So we got it out there. People started using it, and here's like some of the initial clinical PATLAC experience. First of all, I wanted to show some publications. And as I mentioned, we released it in 2018, and everything kind of started to go up after that. Hopefully it's because people are doing more modeling. And then, of course, the big guys came on the block. So we had the 2-meter scanner from United Imaging in 2019. The Siemens Quadra came in 2020. And then the GE Omni Legend was in 2022. And you know, as previous speakers had mentioned, Ramsey, I think this is just going to keep going up. There's just so much work that needs to be done here. Aarhus, Denmark was one of our collaborators on this, and they're interesting because they have 3 vision scanners, which is our PET-CT scanner, and for over a year they did the first patient of the day using this full-blown, fully automated technique. And you can see over here on the left, I think someone else had already showed this slide. I think, Gabal, you had it maybe in your slide deck. But the tumor to background of the metabolic rate of FDG favors the PATLAC, so it has like a better signal to noise compared to the SUV. And they also showed this interesting case in their paper where there was clearly 2 bright lesions on the SUV image. But if you break it down into its components, the one in the armpit didn't show any bound FDG, but it did show the free FDG. And sure enough, that was AV malformation. There was just blood pooling in the armpit. Whereas the suspicious nodule in the lung was definitely metabolically active and not so much due to free FDG. And Dr. Diaz, he was the MD, the lead author, and probably on 5% of the time, you know, they would get something like this that was obvious, but he said he liked it because it was like a helping hand, and it gave him more confidence when he read the SUV image and he wrote up his report. So they have all these massive data sets, and they published another paper building up normal MRFDG and distribution volume values. And like as Rich had mentioned, back in the days when we had single slice PET, and then eventually we had organ, we had those well published for brain and cardiac, but this was the first time we could do the whole body. And these will only get better with the advent of the long axial field of view scanners. So we're on our way to like a reference library. So now you have an individual patient come in, you make this measure, and you can see how close they are to the normal range. Kind of what they do in PET amyloid and tau image with the brain atlas and the statistical measures they use. I won't go into these in too detail. This really isn't my forte. I will say that Dr. Tyler Fromm from Washington University, he's a guest editor of a whole journal that's going to be dedicated to kinetic modeling in the clinic. And so there'll be a whole journal. Unfortunately, I can't remember the journal name. But people have looked at prostate cancer using PATLAC, immunotherapy. The issue with immunotherapy, when you're a patient, you're treated, your whole body's inflamed. Typically, you have to wait 3 months to kind of let that die down. Then you can have your follow-up PET CT. And the hope here is that maybe kinetic modeling can shorten that time so that they can either adjust the treatment or stop the treatment if it's not working, since it is expensive treatment. And then there's been some work in diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And these are the references here, the different groups working on it. And then I wanted to mention just a couple methodology things. As Rich has always preached, we got lucky with FDG. It's a very nice, well-behaved tracer. And it looks like that population-based input function approach is going to work, and that means we don't need to start the PET scan, at least if we're doing PATLAC, while the patient's on the bed. They can go to the uptake room, do their usual wait 40, 50 minutes, come in, and then have their PET CT scan. So we've already incorporated that into our clinical product. So now you can have fully automated while still doing the typical clinical workflow. And then the other thing that's very hot and is very well needed is that fully automated whole body motion correction that was kind of mentioned before, that Falcon project, which is a multi-site. So kind of in the academic clinical research world, it's working, but we've got to somehow get that into our product, which is a bigger challenge just because of clinical performance. And these are the references here for those. So the future outlook, I think we've got to translate what we find or have been finding into our products. And I list out kind of what I've already talked about. And we definitely need to get that patient motion correction in there as best we can. And certainly we at Siemens, and I'm sure other vendors are also actively working on this point, and also develop new kinetic models. But the final slide I really want to get to, and I'm shocked that nobody has mentioned the very first bullet point, because that's all I hear about these days is, this is the question and discussion period. At what level should AI be deployed? So that artificial intelligence. And I've thought for sure other people are going to talk about AI. And I'll give you my personal take of where I think it belongs, at least in this context. So for acquisition of the PET data, I think it's hard to beat good detectors, electronics, and firmware. I think they'll always be more robust, more trustworthy, less likely to go wrong. It's not to say AI can't support it, perhaps in some role. Reconstruction, I think the same thing. You really need to stick to your PET principles, incorporate those as best as you can, the attenuation correction, the normalization. And also the kinetic modeling. I feel like we're better off using kinetic modeling than just throwing some kind of generic AI that it kind of looks like it could work, but do you really trust it? But I will say for AI, where I'm a cheerleader, is the image analysis in the reading. I think that's its sweet spot, since when nuclear physicians read these images, it's all about training and learning and all those years of residency. And that's what AI is really good at. And I don't think it should replace the reading physician. I think the physician needs to be there. But I think it's a natural second set of eyes to help him or her. And I think it would make them more efficient, and it perhaps even miss fewer things, call their eyes to the attention of something that maybe is not quite right. And this is really important in today's reimbursement world where they got to read quickly. And I think all this work we're doing with the improved quantification and the kinetic modeling and developing those reference libraries, that's just a natural fit for AI as well. So I think that's where AI is really going to fit in. There's other points we could talk to too, but that was one I really, and in particular I wanted to ask Rich. I don't think I know your opinion of AI and where it belongs in the kinetic modeling world, or Cabal either. If you guys have, I'm sure you've thought about it. But
Well, let's thank Ann for a very nice talk.